Train Sim World 4 includes the debut appearance of another US passenger operator in the TSW series. This is Metrolink and their Antelope Valley Line, but although I'm generally a fan of US commuter trains, I have always thought this was a bad route choice ever since I saw the first announcements of TSW 4. Something like the Altamont Corridor Express from San Jose to Stockton would have been a much better idea. The Antelope Valley Line runs for 75 miles from Los Angeles Union Station to Lancaster, traversing the New Hall Pass and running through apparently spectacular mountain and desert scenery in the process. This route is set in the present day, complete with the brand new Vista Canyon Station, but unfortunately, the schedule on this route is quite Spartan. More on that later. I can't say I was surprised to see that this pack barely includes any rolling stock. Just the questionable looking EMD F125 diesel locomotive and Hyundai-Rotem Bi-Level coaches in the modern Metrolink livery. Something Dovetail should do at some point is add the 484 steam locomotive number 3751 from the Atchison, Topeka and Santa Fe Railway as an add-on for this route. I know this locomotive is based in the Los Angeles area in real life, and although it may not be entirely prototypical, it would still be cool to run steam excursions on the Antelope Valley Line. After all, American steam is a long overdue addition to this game, but of course, if Dovetail ever did add 3751 to the game, they would never have got the idea from me. Considering that DTG were able to work out a licensing deal with Metrolink for TSW4, it's disappointing that, by comparison, the only Metrolink equipment in TS Classic is a very, very basic and unbranded EMD F125 with Bombardier Bi-Level coaches. This poor quality locomotive, with its fictional default livery, recycled sounds, and silent alerter that still hasn't been fixed after all these years, is all we've got for making scenarios with Metrolink traffic on the Orange County line, which is part of the Pacific Surfliner route. The inclusion of only EMD F125s and Hyundai-Rotem coaches in TSW4 doesn't make any sense. Metrolink also uses the MPI MP36PH-3C diesel locomotive and Bombardier Bi-Level coaches in real life, and we've already got Caltrain variants of that equipment in-game, so there's no reason why DTG should have left out a Metrolink reskin. That's the sort of thing I would actually expect them to do, recycling, reskinning, and reselling existing rolling stock instead of using the opportunity to make new rolling stock that we don't have yet. Proceeds to stare angrily at the 2 loco add-on bundles from TSW3. The passenger trains in-game don't look realistic at all when they're all made up entirely of Hyundai-Rotem coaches. In real life, you'll often see a mix of Hyundai-Rotem and Bombardier coaches used in the same consist, despite the non-matching liveries. I still think the cab car is hideous, but I'm aware of why it's designed this way. The reasons are written in blood. When I first got in the F125's cab, I was disappointed to find out that the interior of the engine room isn't modelled, as proven by this door refusing to open. Considering that there are multiple electric locomotives in this game where the devs actually modelled a walk-through engine room, such as the BR112, BR143, BR155, BR182, and ACS64. Considering the appearance of that useful immersion booster on those 5 engines, I don't understand why the implementation of this feature is so inconsistent. Hell, the BR185-2 doesn't even have a walk-through interior despite being included in the same route as the BR143. As for the cab interior on the F125, I think it looks like a modernised version of the EMD F159PHI. It's got a similar looking control stand and everything. I cannot comment on the accuracy of the sounds, due to my limited knowledge on the real F125, but I will say that I find it so bizarre to hear the whine of the traction motors on a diesel locomotive. Normally, at least on the locomotives I'm familiar with, the engine is so loud that you can't hear the motors at all. I'm a bit confused because of this locomotive's construction. She is still labelled as an EMD product despite using a Caterpillar prime mover and a body shell designed by Vossloh. How much of this locomotive is actually from EMD? Interestingly, although the F125 is a modern Tier 4 compliance locomotive, Metrolink is the only company that uses this design, of which 40 examples were built between 2015 and 2021, although the first one didn't enter service until 2017. The competing Siemens SC44 Charger, on the other hand, now has at least 85 examples in service across the United States. I'd quite like to see a Charger in TSW, preferably the coaster variant. And I'm curious to know why no other company besides Metrolink has ever ordered the F125. At first glance, I thought the 5 included scenarios had strange concepts, especially that one called Extinct Video Rental Chain, where you drive past the LA River as part of a ruddy film shoot. I have no interest in modern Hollywood, for a variety of reasons that I won't go into in this video. It almost seems like the sole purpose of this scenario is a desperate attempt to entertain the easily excited fanboys, instead of those who just want to focus on running the normal commuter services. Other bizarre concepts include transporting a prisoner to a correctional facility in Los Angeles, because that definitely sounds like something a bloody commuter train would be used for in real life. The last one I'll mention is called Take a Hike. Yeah, that's what I want the Dovetail higher-ups to do right now, which involves checking in on a panicked hiker. Apparently, this is something the driver of a commuter train should be doing instead of concentrating on his job of driving the damn train. Timetable mode is no better than the scenarios, and it further highlights just how bad this route choice is because the schedule is so bloody Spartan. While it's shown as 41 playable services for both the F125 and cab car, most of the LA to Lancaster passenger services are split into 2 parts, as if to try and cover up the fact that it takes at least 2 hours to cover the whole line. 14 of the F125's services are non-revenue empty stock moves, while there are 16 non-revenue services with the cab car leading. The Antelope Valley Line shares tracks with the Ventura County line between Los Angeles Union Station and Burbank downtown, and there are a few VC services represented in timetable mode as well, further highlighting just how few AVL services there actually are. With all the non-revenue and Ventura County services taken out of the picture, and combining the services that are split into 2 parts, that leaves us with only a measly 22 Antelope Valley services in this timetable, 11 southbound with the cab car leading, and 11 northbound with the locomotive leading. Only 9 trains a day in each direction cover the whole line. One service starts and another terminates at Via Princesa. While this is realistic, it's still very annoying for those who prefer busier routes. Not helping the situation is the limited number of stations, of which the AVL only has 13, and the long distances between said stations, especially once you get north of Vista Canyon. Going north, the stations are as follows: Los Angeles Union Station, Glendale, Burbank Downtown, Burbank Airport North, Sun Valley, Selma, San Fernando, Newhall, Santa Clarita, Via Princesa, Vista Canyon, Vincent Grade Acton, Palmdale, and Lancaster. If you complete all the mastery challenges, you will also see trams on the LA Metro's Gold Line through Los Angeles Union Station. And speaking of trams, or light rail, because apparently it's taboo for modern transport operators to ever say the old-fashioned word tram. It's about bloody time we got a tram network or more metro-style lines in TSW, especially lines A and C of the Lyon Metro. or part of the Melbourne tram network. The General Electric ES44C4 from Cajon Pass has a timetable mode layer on this route, albeit with only 5 playable services, each split into 2 parts. You can also get Union Pacific SD70 ACEs on the AVL if you've got the Sherman Hill route, but I'm not going to bother wasting my money on a route focused solely on heavy freight just to have the locomotives appear on a completely different route. Something I did for this review was explore the stations on foot to see what their modelling was like. For starters, and prior to this add-on's release, I didn't know that Lancaster Station consisted of just 1 platform and 2 dead-end sidings next to the main line. Palmdale is the first station south of Lancaster, and I think it looks nice enough, especially where the clock tower is concerned, although there's an invisible wall preventing you from walking through these gaps in the tower. Meanwhile, there was this miserable-looking sod tending to the hot dog stand, and I dare say he's longing to be on a better route than the Antelope Valley Line, such as the Ski Tube Rack Railway in Australia or the Cascais Line in Portugal. This game is in dire need of those kinds of unique routes, especially a rack railway. Meanwhile, down at Burbank Airport North, something just doesn't look right. I don't know about you, but it looks to me like there's barely any detail along N San Fernando Boulevard. And it doesn't help that the road traffic is so barren and lifeless. Considering that this is the USA, you would think that there would be excessive numbers of cars absolutely everywhere. It appears that the concourse at Los Angeles Union Station isn't modelled, so the only parts of the station you can explore in-game are the platforms as well as the underpass below said platforms. There are blank walls at both ends of this underpass, with no sign of exits modelled in. I think that, out of all the stations on the Antelope Valley Line, my favourite is either Santa Clarita or Vincent Grade Acton. The latter has strange-looking shelters that remind me of an old Wild West saloon, the sort of thing you would even see in the SpongeBob episode called Pest of the West. I also noticed that the station is on quite a steep incline of 1 in 63, but the steepest grade anywhere on this line is around 1 in 50. While I find the contrasting city, mountains, and desert scenery to be fascinating, to an extent, most of the route still looks way too similar to Cajon Pass, and that's one of the biggest flaws with this thing. I also noticed what appear to be departure screens at all the stations except Via Princesa. Sometimes they actually work, and at least it's not the same overused and inaccurate design we've seen on the Long Island Railroad and at least 4 other US routes. As for the inevitable bugs, you can clearly see vehicles spawning and despawning when you're standing at the crossing next to New Hall Station. And at this crossing, the road surface is actually set too low, so the car wheels face right through these, for want of a better word, pads. At the next station down the line, Silmar San Fernando, it would appear that this bus arrived before the concrete had a chance to set, or rather, Dovetail were just being sloppy with asset placement. Wouldn't be the first time. I only had the patience to run 1 timetable mode service on this route to see what the line and driving experience were like. This northbound run was on train 213, the 11:39 Los Angeles to Lancaster service, calling at all stations on the way. Starting out with what I thought was a broken red signal at Union Station, but it was actually red for a southbound train coming in. As for the cab view on the F125, it sort of feels like a central dashboard instead of being off to the right-hand side like it actually is. As for the driving experience, I at least had a good first impression of that. The F125 accelerates fairly quickly, although that's mainly because she's always hauling a light load of no more than 5 coaches. As for her brakes, these are fairly strong, and they don't take an unreasonably long time to release, which is more than I can say for some other locomotives in this game. Throughout the run, I only saw 2 AI trains. One of them was the service I had to wait for at Los Angeles Union Station, and the only other train I saw throughout the entire run, outside of the yards, was a southbound service that I passed at Vista Canyon. The route's performance was perfectly fine, ranging from 60 to 85 FPS for most of the journey, and there wasn't too much stuttering, even in the cities and other built-up areas. But as I was driving along, I thought that it all just felt so goddamn lifeless, even without taking the Spartan train schedule into account. Some of the roads, especially that highway through Newhall Pass, looked so quiet that they could give the highways on the Miami to West Palm Beach route in TS Classic a run for its money. I especially hated the section from Vista Canyon to Vincent Grade Acton because, for fuck's sake, that's 31 minutes of meandering through a bloody canyon or desert without stopping. 31 minutes! Which means this is by far the longest distance between two stations on the line. Meanwhile, the final section from Palmdale to Lancaster is incredibly boring because it is just 7 miles of dead straight track. Having pulled off at least one full-length run on the Antelope Valley Line, I think it's basically like a slower and much quieter version of Peninsula Corridor through scenery that's way too similar to Cajon Pass. And speaking of commuter lines in California, that's another reason why Dovetail shouldn't have made the Antelope Valley Line for TSW, because we already have a Californian commuter line in the game. If they absolutely had to make another route in this state, they should have made San Diego to Oceanside with the Coaster F59PHI, SC44 and Bombardier Bi-Level coaches. That section is only 41 miles long, an awful lot shorter than the AVL, and has better scenery variation, in my opinion. You've got a built-up city, steep hills, and coastal running all on the same section. But the section from San Diego Santa Fe Depot to San Diego Oldertown runs right alongside a part of the San Diego trolley network. And if Dovetail ever made the coaster route for TSW, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't bother with any representation of the trolleys, even though that section would look completely wrong without them. To summarise, the Antelope Valley Line fails as an add-on due to the combination of its Spartan, yet realistic timetable, unreasonably long journey times for people who don't like long journeys, the lifeless road/scenery detail in general, and the glaring lack of an MP36PH-3C with Bombardier Bi-Level coaches. On that front, Dovetail subverted my expectations, albeit in the wrong way. I almost wonder if DTG knew that a route concept this fundamentally flawed wouldn't sell very well if they released it as a standalone add-on, which would explain why they shoved it onto the base game so that more people would have it, even though they may not necessarily want to. I still stand by my belief that the Antelope Valley Line was an awful route choice on Dovetail's part. I don't care about all the fancy and varied scenery, debatably unique motive power, or the challenging driving experience when there is simply not enough going on here to make the route interesting from a gameplay perspective.